I'm focused on his spirit cause it keeps me from his fire. The Holy Ghost is with me, so my fear I leave behind. My sins were all diminished when he took that breath and died. And if you think I'ma give up on my God, the devil is a lie. The devil is a lie. The devil is a lie.
Hello. Welcome to Black Tea News. I'm your host, Christina Barr, and today we're going to be talking about this huge scandal with Joe Biden, which has been a scandal for a long time, talking about his health and his mental decline. But people assume there was something else going on. And so we got Friday, people were talking about the release of the Heard tapes when he had the interview for his classified documents and how that didn't sound great. And apparently on Friday, he allegedly got the diagnosis that he has cancer. So it's all just kind of interesting timing. We're just noticing the timing is interesting. That he has prostate cancer and it's advanced. It doesn't mean that they can't do some treatment and other things like that, but he is up in age, but it's metastasized to the point where it's in his bones. And this is like a slow moving cancer. So the fact that it's already at this point in time, it is very hard to believe for the public or for doctors that they did not know prior that he had this condition. It doesn't just spring up on you overnight. And I would think it's pretty hard to believe that they didn't know. People were talking about a clip of Biden some time ago when he said that he had cancer. And that was in 2022, though his staff or different people claim that he was talking about skin cancer. And was he? So, my heart goes out to the family, terrible thing to go through. And just, he's lived a long life. And his better days are obviously ahead of him. And so it also puts in perspective the things that his brother said when he dropped out of the race, which we'll get to. But I felt bad. Some people don't feel bad. I felt bad for Joe for a while because I'm like, something is wrong. And his family is just watching him deteriorate on the world stage in the most important job for the country while trying to still compete and again for the same spot. And then he had to be forced out. And it's just awful. It's awful that we've watched this car wreck. And it's even more awful that the media ignored it, covered for him. And now they're trying to rake in a bunch of cash from all the people spilling the tea, like Jake Tapper, as if he wasn't a part of the problem, as if he weren't a part of the problem. So we're going to talk about that. I also want to talk about some comments from Hillary Clinton, reaming on Republican women. And I also, for the first time, I want to cover this story about a woman in Georgia who is on life support and has been for some weeks to try to keep her baby alive. And NBC ran a story trying to blame a heartbeat bill, and the pro-choicers are angry about it. And there's some misinformation going around about the story for sure, but the mentality isn't making a lot of sense from the left. So if we have time, I'm going to table that for like the last thing. But before we jump into everything, I want to encourage you guys to go blackteanews.com, check out different content, website, articles, videos, etc. If you like what I do, please consider leaving a donation on the website because it does cost to stream, run my site, all that good stuff. You guys can support, very much appreciate you guys. You guys can also check out different merch that's available on the website as well. So you guys can check out that. And there's also a link to my different books that are on the website. I'll tell you guys about Comic-Con in a minute. But there's also a link in the description to like an Amazon page where you guys can read more about some of my books. So you guys can check all that stuff out. And if you guys want to give super chats, you guys can do that. If you're watching on Facebook, you guys can send stars. So we haven't seen each other in a week. And I am dead tired. I'm really tired. I thought I was saying, guys, I need another day. But Yeah, besides Comic-Con, there were other things that were going on. It was just like a crazy week, but the Comic-Con itself went well, so thank you for your prayers. That I'd have a good, con and other stuff like that. I did have a good con. I sold a lot of books, and I had people come back to my table who had gotten books before and really loved them. And so it's like worth the price of admission. You're a writer, like you want, people you want to write what you love, you know, and for people to go out of their way to spend money on what your baby and what you're passionate about, and then to go read it and to like it, and then to come back and affirm that it's just one of the greatest feelings in the world. So the book that they kept coming back and saying that they read and they loved was The Color of God's Eyes. I hope they like the rest of them. But that's the one, because I've done this show several times or whatever. People had come and got different books or whatever, but the ones that they really liked was that one. That was the response, and there were several people who came back to the table to say that they loved it. Like there's a guy, girls coming to buy books is like a given. There's romance, there's action and other things like that, but my stuff, it looks like it sways romance, and there's romance and stuff. So there was a guy who came to the table and he's like, I want to get the sequel. I'm like, oh, so you like the first one? He's gonna like, you'll obviously I liked it and want the second one. So he bought The Song on the Devil's Lips. And there's another woman who came up to me. She's like, I was looking for you. Oh my gosh. She's like, thank you so much. Thank you. I'm like, thank you. And she's like, no, thank you. And so it was just really exciting. So I was happy about that. And then someone else came up the next day. I also saw an English professor of mine. I went to College for Creative Studies for like a blip of a second. It was just a semester. And that's a school for like, it's an art school. And so I was going for animation and life happened. I didn't have enough to finish school, but I did have an English class. And I think you only needed like a semester of English or whatever anyway, but I had my English class. And so at first she's like, did you go to Wayne State? I was like, no. And then she mentioned CCS. I'm like, yes. And so she looked familiar to me. I'm really bad with names and faces, but and so I was like, yes, I was at CCS. And so I remember being in her classroom and stuff. And so she was just so proud. She's like, what year did you graduate? I'm like, I didn't. She's like, you're doing fine. You're doing great. And she was just so happy that I had, written so many books. And she's like, I just, it's so great that you're so, prolific. And so she ended up coming back to the table and asking for a picture and stuff. So it was neat. It was neat. So I had a good time there, and looking forward to next time, and hopefully going to some other cons. It was a breath of fresh air, kind of, to not talk about politics and it just be in the zone of something else that I really love to do. And there's a lot of people, I'm sure, that wouldn't care for my politics too much. We had gotten to those kinds of discussions, but it was just about art and pop culture and things like that. And it's really important that we as a society, we can disagree on policies and how we achieve. I think a lot of us want the same things. We just have different ways of believing they'll come about. Some things like we're deeply divided on, including on what we want. But I think most people, they want to, they want good economic outcomes for people. For example, Democrats and Republicans may have very different ways on and thoughts about how you get that to be achieved. Like they might say we need to pump more into, welfare kind of things. And Republicans are going to be like, well, we need to make sure that people can keep money in their own pockets and become, people who can drive their own destinies, and that's lower taxes, and that's cutting regulations, and so forth and so forth, and people privately giving and being charitable, and then we could do tax write-offs for people being charitable to incentivize people to keep doing things like that. So I think a lot of things we want the same things, but we just have different ideas on what works and what doesn't work, and those are the things that we have to debate. So I think we have more in common than not. But we need shared interests. And that's one thing that sucks about so much of our entertainment, like things like Disney and corporations like that, getting so political, because we need things that we can just sit back and enjoy and talk about. And, when we go and touch grass, so, it was just nice to kind of be in a different zone, have a little bit of a breather. And the Wi-Fi in the convention center was so terrible, I couldn't even really go on Twitter and look up different stuff. But there was less people on Saturday. On Friday, I could be online, and I saw the Her thing drop, the stuff with Biden. And on Sunday, it was kind of in and out, as far as the Wi-Fi. And then my sister showed me the report about Biden's cancer, and she showed me from an article, it was not the bee, like the Babylon bee. And then I'm like, oh my gosh, that's not the bee. So that is a real report. Like that they're reporting that he has prostate cancer. So anyway, it was a good weekend for me. It was a long weekend, and I still kind of want a little bit of a break, but we got to get to the news, or it's all just gonna start piling up. Anyway, thank you guys for your patience and letting me chit chat about my life a bit, and for you guys following, and for you guys, I know some of you have read some of my stuff, and so I just thank you for your well wishes. Okay, well, let's talk about the big story. President Biden, former President Biden. First of all, that sucks. It's he's been through that with his family. They've been through that. A lot of people who've had to deal with folks passing away from cancer. There was a woman in our church who passed away during the pandemic who had cancer. That was just like gutted so many of us. It's a terrible thing, and people can feel terrible. Like I already said, I get some of you guys don't like him. Like I saw some people in my comments when I posted them on Facebook. Some of y'all don't like him. Yep, nobody's gotta be rude. I didn't see any there's some people like and or whatever, and some people were like, this is probably not true. And I don't think there was too many people who were like outright like celebrating or rude about it. But it's terrible for anyone to have to go through, but he has lived a long life. I don't know how much time that his family will have with him, but he's an old man. He's up there. I have felt bad watching Biden decline for a while. I think was very evident while he was president that there was a decline, and people were throwing out all sorts of things. Prostate cancer, I didn't like throw that one out. They're acting like they just found out about this diagnosis. To me, that doesn't make a lot of sense, because we're at stage 4 and it's metastasizing his bones. It doesn't just happen like that. And I'll play a couple clips of doctors talking about that. It doesn't seem like they were just being honest about it, or maybe there's things that they didn't want to know. He took a lot of trips to Delaware where they don't have different visitor logs about who's coming in to see him. So people are curious if he was seeing his doctors in. Was he secretly being treated? I don't know. There's been a lack of leaks if that's the case. I don't know, but it's very clear that his White House did shield him a lot from cabinet members, from the media. He barely had any press conferences. He didn't really meet with his cabinet. Mike Johnson told a story about how it was so hard for him to see Biden. And even when he did finally get a meeting with Biden, he wasn't going to be alone. Like his staff and stuff were still there. And Biden was the one who initiated, like, hey, let me talk to him. I wonder how much of his mind that he has. I mean, he's not like totally like lost it, but he probably has moments enough that his staff, felt like they needed to control him. Um, but they definitely wrangled him for a reason. And I've he's not a good guy. I'm sure there's lots of good things that people appreciate about Biden and stuff, but there's a lot of awful things about Biden too. That's just like really, really trashy, this family. But it is hard. It's felt like watching elder abuse. His wife is trash. I don't know how to be nice about it. I don't know if she's just likes the power trip or whatever, but I wonder how young Democrats feel about all this. Not, wanting something new, obviously not wanting Trump to be president, and hearing these stories about his health, knowing how long it's kind of been going on and what things must have been hidden. Once the debate crash happened, that's when people started spilling the tea about how things were kind of bad at that point. But if Biden, to me, it looks like they really were going to try to squeeze him through. And maybe they would have used a cancer diagnosis if he had won the presidency as an excuse for this is why he's going to step down. And then, Kamala would have been the president or whatever. They should have just let him step down earlier and had her have her become the president. I didn't want that. That was like the thing I wanted to happen least in the world. Okay. But this is probably what should have happened best for them. And maybe just what the right thing to do, just period, was for him to step down and for her to be the president. And then depending on what kind of job she did, which I assume would have been bad, but if she would have already been the president, it would have been the incumbent pretty much, she would have had a better shot at winning. Who knows? Maybe they would have got a victory. But if you're a Democrat and you're watching them, haul around this really, really old, fragile man because he was too stubborn to step aside, because being president was a lifelong dream and he really needed to knock it off of his bucket list. It's, he ran on a lie. Like I saw Charlottesville and the anti-Semitic bile coming out of their mouths, and Donald Trump said there are very fine people on both sides, which isn't true. And he was confronted several times. So he if he cared to know, he ought to have known that it wasn't true. And he made his campaign launch video on that lie. So he didn't need to do it for himself or whatever. For that reason, he did it for himself. Maybe for his son, maybe for influence in the Biden crime family. But for the Democrats, pretty darn selfish. Pretty darn selfish. And he ran, James Clyburn and other folks helped him, get the drop on Bernie to push him forward and through or whatever. So he became the president and he pitched himself as like a transitionary figure, meaning that everyone assumed he wouldn't run again. And then he did, probably to shore up things for his family. And I wonder how much Jill was driving that. I mean, there were reports about when he said he wasn't dropping out that Jill and Hunter were really driving that. Someone saying there needs to be an investigation. I don't know what all the Trump, folks are going to do. I think there should be an investigation. And I think there's a narrative. Well, to me, it seems obvious that they want this news of the cancer diagnosis to put a pin in the conversations about Biden's mental decline and those sorts of cover up, because you have Jake Tapper's book coming out. And so people are getting advanced copies of that. And there's things in there that are nuts, but there are things in there that we have seen. But I mean, the one thing that was that's being reported now is that they were so concerned about Biden continuously falling. They said he was so fragile. They're concerned that if he fell again, that he was going to have to be in a wheelchair. I'm like, that's pretty crazy. I mean, I wouldn't have guessed that. I mean, you're always cautious when very old people fall anyway, and they can easily take their hip out or something like that, become bedridden. So that's not, but they had him out there on his bike, and of course there's that video of him falling on his bike, falling down the stairs. But they talked about like him wearing different shoes, and they would really, really prep him for where he's walking. You see people like guiding him all the time. They had like a guided like light up tape or whatnot, like light, but I think like fluorescent sort of tape to guide his path. There's a video that I've shown you guys, I'm sure you've seen, at the Clooney fundraiser with Obama leading him out, and everybody was watching that like he is unwell. Like, this isn't good. He doesn't look good. And then we started talking about that, and the media tells us that we're paranoid, we're crazy, and those are cheap fakes. And the media said that, and the White House said it, and they just had this really toxic relationship with the American people, where we're like, we see clearly what's going on, and they said, don't believe your lying eyes. And now, well, after the debate, there was okay, we're throwing this old man under the bus, and now they want to cash in. Jake Tapper was one of the people fussing at, I think it was Laura Trump, like, are you his doctor? Like, how can you say these things? And now he's like, oh gosh, I have a book now. And their attitude is, well, we were lied to. Maybe like Chris Krasilla and these different journalists, like, well, maybe we should have pressed harder. Maybe we should have covered it more. But the White House would get so angry. The White House would get so upset when we would ask questions. Oh, they get so upset. So, like, how do you guys treat Donald Trump? Do you treat Donald Trump and his administration with kid gloves? No. Did you guys treat the Bush administration or any other administration that didn't have a D next to the name with kid gloves? No. You didn't just ask questions, you pressed. You did investigations. They used to call it investigative reporting. Did you know that? Reporters used to not just write down exactly what the White House told them. They used to actually do research, and they'd have sources, and they'd actually get real stories and get behind the heart of the matter. They used to do things like that. So being like, oh, we were lied to. How come the average Joe watching Joe on TV could see what was going on, and y'all couldn't see it, and you were in the press room? You guys are on the plane, in the press pool, and you couldn't see it. It's not that you couldn't, it's that you didn't want to. And it's just really that simple. It's really that simple. So they're trying to rake in all this cash now by spilling the tea. And I think also part of it is they want to air out all this stuff and be like, oh, well, we missed it big time with Biden, so we really have to. Trump is really old too, so we really got to be on him. And oh, his doctors say this, but Biden's doctor said other things too. We really have to press. I think they're laying the groundwork so they could really go after Trump and stuff too. I hope these scandals don't go away anytime soon. There should be investigations. And people, no, I don't think anyone's going to go to jail or anything like that. And I don't honestly think anyone's going to be held accountable. I'm sorry to just like let out all the air in your balloon. The best way, I think, you could really have accountability is to, like, you just would list all these people, and we as a society would say no credibility for this journalist, for that journalist, for that journalist, no credibility for that advisor, and this person, that person. But they just lie. Like, look at the way that they just pretended like they weren't tyrannical nut jobs about COVID. They'll flip so quick. they'll flip so quick, you know? So that's terrible about his diagnosis. But if they expect us to just stop talking about this because this news came out and to not get to the bottom of his mental decline, no, we got to keep asking these questions. And by the way, the media's already moved on to Republicans pounce. You know, when Democrats do something bad, they start framing the story as Republicans pounce. And so and they literally use Republicans pounce. This tweet by the Daily Beast: Donald Trump Jr. and MAGA world quickly pounced on the news of Joe Biden's cancer diagnosis with rampant speculation about a cover-up of the true state of the former president's health. Republicans pounce. That's the way they try to frame the story, to trick people into being mad at Republicans for talking about it rather than making sure that Democrats are held accountable and the media is held accountable. That's what they do. That's what they do. So there were some interesting guests on Morning Joe talking about this. Dr. Zeke Emanuel was on MSNBC today. I think there's a Morning Joe clip. I think this one is also Morning Joe too, but this is MSNBC. This is one of their favorite doctors talking about Biden's diagnosis.
You're an oncologist, obviously incredibly respected. You believe that it is likely, just for those just tuning in, you believe it is likely, if this prostate cancer has spread to the bone, that he could have had it for up to a decade, but certainly it's likely. Would it be fair to say it's likely to have had this for at least several years?
Oh, more than several years. You don't get prostate cancer.
So again, I just want to stop you. So this is not speculation. If you have prostate cancer that is spread to the bone, then he's most certainly, you are saying, had it when he was president of the United States.
Oh, yeah. He did not develop it in the last 100, 200 days. He had it while he was president. He probably had it at the start of his presidency in 2021. Yes, that I don't think there's any disagreement about that.
That's insane. Now, you could say it's possible he had it and didn't know. He had physicals, which there's some certain things that they left out of those physicals that were in Obama's and that were in Trump's physicals and Daddy Bush and other folks. Because once you hit a certain age and you're a man, they start checking that prostate very frequently. So it could be that he knew and they were just avoiding certain things because they didn't want everybody else to know. They didn't want the public to know. And people are asking questions and speculating. Is that why he was taking so many trips to Delaware? Was he being secretly treated or seen or whatnot? We're not sure. I'm sure people will continue. People in the comments like, oh, they knew. People will continue asking these questions if they don't shame everybody out of asking the questions. Like, I guess they shamed them from asking questions about his decline. But we still ask the questions. But this is another interesting clip.
Going to run for president for another 4 years. Obviously, the PSA exam is not 100% accurate, and I've never met a doctor that doesn't say you needed to do the PSA exam and also have the physical exam as well. I just find it hard to believe that any White House physician wouldn't say, okay, well, what my doctor and what every other doctor says, which is, okay, we've done the PSA test and that's fine, but at least once a year, we need to do a physical exam. Again, if you're just talking about a 78-year-old guy that is not running the free world, that's one thing. But if you're a White House physician and you have any man over 40 years old, are you not going to at least say, hey, once a year, like every other physician says, once a year, we need to do a physical exam and check, because this is like one of the leading causes, one of the leading sicknesses for men over 40.
Yeah, I mean, Joe, I think 100%. And did they do a digital rectal exam to assess his prostate? Again, typically that's done in the presence of symptoms. To your point, he's the leader of the free world. Did they do it and not characterize it? It's hard to know. We're speculating here. I would say, in an abundance of caution, probably be holistic and comprehensive. That would make sense. It is interesting to note that President Trump's, President Obama's, and President Bush II, in their most recent physicals, in their terms of office, obviously 2025 for President Trump, did comment on their PSA levels. And so they got screened while in office, and they commented on it. It's not easy to access the most recent ones from President Biden. You can read the summary articles. I couldn't access it on the archive site on the White House just before I came on. But according to those that were able to, there is not a report of a PSA test on the most recent physical that was read out for President Biden's last year in office. And so it's to say what was done, what was not done. You and I would be speculating, but the other three most recent occupants of the White House had it drawn, and it was reported out. In the case of President.
Yeah. So why didn't we know about those PSA levels? Back when 2020 was going on, that election, I don't think I wasn't streaming every day back then, but I did some streams sometimes, and I was definitely still active on Twitter and Facebook at the time. And during the campaign, I think Biden really benefited from the pandemic and not having to go to rally town to town. And, they did some, but it was like a couple people in a circle in a room. And there was a lot of virtual campaigning and things like that because of the pandemic. So he really benefited from not having to run sort of a normal race. But there was a lot of times when they would call early lids. And when they call a lid, that's when they tell the press there's no more events. You guys can get out of here. and there were different accounts keeping track of every time they would call a lid. And it would be very early in the day. It's campaign season. Why are they calling so many lids? And I recall when Ginsburg died, and I'm like, where's Biden? This is a huge deal. And where are you immediately rallying? And he was just kind of MIA for a second, when it first happened. And I'm like, this guy is sick. And I was just putting the pieces together. I'm like, he's sick. I know they've been hiding some stuff. I'm surprised there isn't kind of just more. Maybe there is more. I guess more of that we haven't seen publicly. The debate was the spectacle that just collapsed everything. But I'm like, this guy's, and I'm not saying the doctors seemed to think that he had cancer back then too. I don't know what was slowing him down in that kind of way. I don't know if it was his mental decline or other kind of illnesses, but I'm just something is wrong. Because this isn't just I know it's a different kind of campaign because of the pandemic, but he's not acting or moving in a way that would be appropriate for such a time as this, So I've been thought he was sick for a while. So it's pretty incredible that the media is just oh, well, we didn't know, and maybe we should have known, but we didn't know. Nobody knew. And then Jake Tapper, and we'll have Van Jones and all these guys come on TV and talk about oh, well, I have a clip of Van Jones somewhere. Let me pull it up. I'm like, why do you have Van Jones on here talking? Why don't you have some folks that were right about this stuff? I don't want to play the whole thing. It's 3 minutes. But they're just complaining about, Van Jones said there are people who knew and said nothing, and that is a crime against the Republic. And I think Democrats are going to pay for being part of what is now being revealed to be a massive cover up. I think part of this is getting this out the way now, so we're not rehashing it. Or they hope we're not hashing it out by the time the midterms come along. I think that's part, they want to push this stuff out now, to kind of get it over with. I don't think they're just trying to be honest for the moment. You know, they know they did a bad thing and they've got to come clean before, you know, it's too late to come clean, and it ruins their electoral chances. Chris Murphy said, I can play this clip of Chris Murphy, and then we'll play the clip for what Biden's brother said after he had dropped out. That one's interesting.
That by 2024, the American public had made up their mind, right? That they wanted the Democratic Party to nominate somebody new. And it was absolutely a mistake for the party to not listen to those voters.
Just to be very clear, do you bear some responsibility as well?
Oh, I think we all bear responsibility. Listen, and I think, you know, we maybe didn't listen as early as we should have, in part because we have immense loyalty to this man who had led this country out of a pandemic, who had been maybe the most prodigious legislator as a president, the Inflation Reduction Act, the Infrastructure Act, the bipartisan gun bill, in a generation. But ultimately, in retrospect, you can't defend what the Democratic Party did because we are stuck with a madman, with a corrupt president in the Oval Office, and we should have given ourselves a better chance to win it.
That's funny to me, like funny in this sick, sad world sort of way. At the end, they're like, oh, in retrospect, you can't defend it because we're stuck with a madman. Aren't there other issues? Like, I know you don't like Trump. You think he's a madman. And yeah, you know, you guys didn't set yourself up for success. Sure, that's true. But what about the fact that we don't know who was really leading the country? Like, who was really behind all those pardons and the legislation or the things that he signed or that he was unaware of that he signed? Like Mike Johnson was like, sir, you signed this thing, and my constituents are asking questions about it. Like, no, I didn't. Like, yes, you did. Yes, you did. You signed these things. You did these things. And it didn't seem like he knew about it. Like, who's actually driving the administration if it wasn't Joe Biden and they had to wrangle him around, you know, like a kid or something? Is that fair to the American people? You guys did a total disservice to the nation. He's like, yeah, I think we all bear some responsibility. Blaming everyone, there's a lot of blame to go around, but blaming everyone, saying, oh, we all bear responsibility, is a way to push it off of you. It's you got to say, I take accountability. Yep, I did X, Y, and Z. Yep, Chris, come on. Come on. Come on, Chris. Chris is trash, though. I don't like trash. I mean, I don't like Chris. Let me play for you guys something that Frank Biden said after Biden withdrew his withdrew from the presidential race. Do you guys remember this? I remember this. I think we talked about it at the time, but it just kind of hits different.
CBS News had a brief conversation with Frank Biden, one of President Biden's two younger brothers. And here's what he told us. He said, I'm incredibly proud of my brother. Selfishly, I will have him back to enjoy whatever time we have left. He is a genuine hero. Country over self. It sounds corny in our cynical political environment, but he nor I are cynical. The goal remains the same: defeat Trump and continue the work that Joe has done. My hope is that our party rallies around this heroic act. We asked him whether he feels that his brother's overall health and vitality played a major role in this decision, and he says, in my humble opinion, absolutely. So a member of the president's family now confirming that the president's health was indeed a major factor.
Yeah, there was a report at the time that he had some kind of health issue that they were kind of, I guess, trying to keep on the down low or whatever. But people weren't really talking about cancer at the time. People were just, talking about Parkinson's and dementia and things like that. But these folks are covering up. But he said he was sick and he's glad that he was going to have more time. And that's usually like the way, like, we want to spend the last moments There's the him not being up to the task of being the leader of the free world, and his family wanting to be with him and protect him. His family did a huge disservice for the country and for the family itself. But they are an odd group of people. They are an odd group of people for sure. Then there was you guys probably already re-seen the clip, but there was a clip where he had said in 2022 during a speech that he had cancer, and the media, well, the his wranglers and stuff were like, oh, he's talking about skin cancer. He's not saying that he has cancer now. He probably had it then. Who knows? Maybe it was just a moment where he slipped and let it be known the truth. Here we go. This is a snippet.
And because it was a 4-lane highway that was accessible, my mother drove us, and rather than us be able to walk. And guess what? The first frost, you know what was happening? It had to put on their windshield wipers to get literally the oil slick off the window. That's why I and so damn many other people I grew up have cancer, and why for the longest time, Delaware had the highest cancer rate in the nation.
So he had said that he had it. So all these things in hindsight seem to have a bit of pattern. It's just hard to believe that they just found out about this on Friday when you're stage 4 and it's in your bones and it's prostate cancer and it's a slow moving cancer. So it's very, very freaking hard to believe. And even the lib doctors are saying it. And again, I think some of these folks are just saying that because they want to get it out of the way. So, and be like, oh, well, we take accountability. The Republicans don't take accountability. Republicans, they don't hold themselves accountable. We're holding ourselves accountable. Those are the kinds of conversations that they're going to have, that's going to be the narrative. So they can go ahead and, by midterms be like, we're the good ones, they're the bad ones, they're the crazy people. They can't hold Trump accountable. And these MAGA folks, they just get in line. But we're out here criticizing Joe Biden and holding people accountable who did this, blah, blah, blah. We had to come to Jesus moment, but it's probably the wrong term for them, but but if alternate reality, if they had a debate, or I'm sorry, if Joe Biden didn't show up for the debate, if he said, I'm not going to dignify, I'm not going to sully the presidency by debating Donald Trump when he caused an insurrection. And if he wanted to go that route, I think he very well could have, because Donald Trump didn't do any debates in the primary. So Biden just wanted to be like, we're not having debates or whatever. I'm not debating him. I think a lot of people would just probably forgave him for it on his side. That would have been better than what actually happened, how he totally just kind of collapsed in front of everybody. And let's say he didn't debate, and let's say he had managed to win. Do you think Jake Tapper and all these folks out here would be propping him up? Wouldn't be propping him up and, squashing dissent? They'd still probably be pretending that this man was fine and dandy. And they would probably wait it out a couple more months, maybe a whole entire year or so into a second term, and then he would step down and Kamala Harris be the president. If he wouldn't just try to do the whole thing, because I still think that his team probably hates her guts. But they just go on pretending like they pretended before the debate. You telling me nobody else could see it until the debate on their side? That's crap. That is crap. So Godspeed to him and his family, and that again, that's a awful diagnosis, but I think it's very hard for the American people to believe that they were unaware of it until just this past Friday. And shame on the media for all the lies and the cover-ups that they had with this man. and shame to his staffers and everybody who's been keeping all this stuff a secret, whether it's his mental decline and whatever. And I'm sure they'll try to say, oh, we really, really need to push and look into Trump because he's up there in age too, and he'll be the oldest president. Like, you know, I'm sure they'll do that. I'm sure they'll do that. And I would like for there to be some accountability, but that's unfortunately just not usually the name of the game in the world of politics. Last thing I'll push or show you guys is this quote from David Axelrod about how he thinks that they should table the conversations because of this diagnosis. And I think Don Jr., you know, said that that's what they were going to use it for. And people are like, oh my gosh, you're so sick for saying this, when this is literally what some of them are trying to do. Use a cancer diagnosis to stop talking about the issue of accountability when it comes to Biden's mental decline. So it's sad, but we still got to talk about it. There should be investigations. I'm not convinced that there's going to be any accountability, but it would be nice if we would at least try.
His medical condition now, his announced medical condition now, do you believe that silences or delays a lot of conversations about his, you know, last year and a half of his presidency for now?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think those conversations are going to happen, but they should be more muted and set aside for now as he's struggling through this.
His medical condition.
Yeah, so that's what folks are talking about. Like, no, it makes it worse because it just doesn't make sense that he didn't know till Friday. And we've been lied to, obviously, a lot. We've been lied to a lot. Anyway, let's move on. I want to talk about Hillary Clinton, who Scott Adams said every now and then we just need to be reminded how awful she was. And she decided to ream on women who do not think the same as her. So let's roll the tape.
What advice do you have for the first female president of the United States?
Well, first of all, don't be a handmaiden to the patriarchy, which kind of eliminates every woman on the other side of the aisle, except for very few. Lisa Murkowski.
Liz Cheney.
Yeah, there's a few. Look, first we have to get there, and it is, you know, obviously so much harder than it should be. So, you know, if a woman runs who I think would be a good president, as I thought Kamala Harris would be, and as I knew I would be, I will support that woman.
Okay. I've got thoughts. I've got thoughts for Miss Hillary Clinton here. Your husband is Bill Clinton. Stand by your man. Your husband allegedly raped a woman, sexually assaulted women. There's a whole Monica Lewinsky thing that happened. What about you tearing down the women accusing Bill Clinton of inappropriate behavior? Whole bimbo eruption. I can't think about that phrase without like hearing Rush Limbaugh talk about it, but they had coordinated efforts to try to silence those women when her husband was a terrible, terrible, terrible man who didn't treat women very well. And she was a part of that. And you could say, well, she was just believing him because that was her husband. She was standing by her. There's a phrase, you guys may have heard it before, the vast right-wing conspiracy theory. Do you know how that originated? Hillary Clinton brought it up when she ran for president. She was asked by, it wasn't Jake Tapper, it was Anderson Cooper, do you still believe that there's a vast right-wing conspiracy theory? And she's like, don't you? It's gotten better funded, is what she said. The vast right-wing conspiracy theory that term originated about Bill Clinton and all these women who were saying that he was doing terrible, shady things. That wasn't a conspiracy theory. It was the truth. And they still use such phrases, or she still used such phrases to make it seem like people are just out to get her. People are just out to get them. People are just out, whatever. So she's married to Bill Clinton. You know, and she pulled the sexist card throughout her campaign. It was implied that Bernie was sexist. You know, Donald Trump warned them, if they come after me for women, I'm going to mention her husband, Bill Clinton. So as soon as that Hollywood Access tape dropped, and that was rough, man. I was working at the Michigan Republican Party at the time, and the feeling of dread, like, man, it's over, that folks had. And I'm just like, if he in his first debate wasn't great to me, like first 15 minutes were solid, and then it just kind of went downhill. And from there, which she had a planned hit piece about some kind of beef with a beauty queen had with him at the end of it or whatever, you know. But anyway, after the Hollywood Access tape, I'm like, he's got to like kill in the next debate. And I remember waiting for that. He apologized for the locker room talk, which most people, I talked to a lot of Democrats, even after the election stuff, who agreed that that's locker room talk and that they say worse in the locker rooms than that. But he apologized for that, but he said it was locker room talk. And then he did the debate. But that night of the debate, I'm like, the second one, I'm like, if he doesn't come and just win that and come hard, it's over. He's got to fight for this. Before the debate, if you guys recall this, he had a press conference with two of Bill Clinton's accusers, and then also another woman. And the other woman was Kathy Shelton. Kathy Shelton, when she was a little girl, she was brutally raped. So brutal that she's unable to have children herself. The person who represented the rapist was Hillary Clinton. And you may say, I don't like Hillary Clinton, but everybody deserves representation. That's fair. She wasn't the public defender. She didn't need to take that case, but she did take the case. And the reason why they want a woman to do it is because it's easier for the jury to be like, you know, oh, maybe she's not as innocent, or like, if there's a woman representing the rapist attacking a little girl, that's easier for them to swallow than a man representing the rapist and attacking the little girl. And so they got a hold of like the evidence they're supposed to test, and you know, there's just different issues like the evidence or whatever being mishandled and whatnot. But Hillary Clinton, she had said, was in an interview years later talking about that case, and she said that she had the guy take a polygraph test. And so he passed the polygraph test, and she laughed and said, it forever destroyed my faith in polygraph tests. And you can find the audio. I just didn't have time to find it before this podcast, but it should be easy to find if you Google it. And so people started talking about that in the 2016 campaign trail. And if you Google it, you'll probably find Snopes articles and other stuff saying, no, Hillary Clinton didn't laugh at a little girl being raped. That's not the claim, or at least the claim that I'm making, because people did debate me, try to fight me like, she didn't laugh at that little girl. She laughed at the fact that he passed a polygraph test because she knew he was guilty. She knew he was guilty, that he actually raped this little girl. And it scarred her life. And the only justice she really felt that she got was the fact that Hillary Clinton lost the 2016 election, which was basically what she had tweeted out. So when she talks about, you know, women being tools or servants or whatever, the patriarchy, who are you kidding, ma'am? That's not our side. Your husband is Bill Clinton. Your husband is Bill Clinton. You helped to ruin the life of a little girl who was raped. So, and you tried to ruin the reputations of the women complaining about your husband. That's what you did. That was your role to play. I could also mention that how many women are aborted. Of course, women are adult humans, so we'll just say females. This woman went on The View and said, hours before your due date, you don't have rights. That's crazy. But she'll treat a rapist better than the preborn. She'll treat a rapist better than the preborn. As Scott Adams said, every now and then it's good to just remember how terrible of a woman she is, how awful she is, and how much we dodged a bullet. How much we dodged a bullet. It's okay to just, and you know, Bill said that he thinks it'll be easier for a woman, a Republican woman, to be president. And that might be the first Republican female, first female president might be a Republican. But she's out here saying, oh, the whole other team is basically eliminated. Why can't you just treat women with respect? Why can't you treat women with enough respect to say, we may not agree on the issues, but I respect that you're out there doing your thing, that you're standing on your principles, that we can have healthy debate. I don't see the world quite like you see it, but at least you're in the game. At least you're out there trying to make a difference. And we can hash out our differences on the debate stage. But go ahead, girl, do you think? How come you can't respect women enough to do that? Michelle Obama, after Hillary Clinton lost, she said, you know, the women who voted for Trump don't know their own voice. Screw you. You don't know who I am. And you don't care enough about me to ask. You don't care enough about me to ask. So she was trash. Hillary Clinton is still trash. And of course, they'll say, oh, Lisa Murkowski or Liz Cheney, the ones who will do what they want them to do. But do you think she had nice words for Liz Cheney before Liz Cheney developed, you know, TDS or whatever? I don't think so. I don't think they had nice words too much for the Cheneys. I don't think so. You know, and Lisa's pretty lib, so, you know, very, very moderate Republican. But anyway, I'm glad to remind you of how terrible she is. K-Cat said, these are the same people who want men in women's spaces. Let's not forget Kamala saying abortion was important so that men wouldn't have to be responsible. Talk about being a tool of the patriarchy. That is a good point. That's a good point. I don't think I've heard Hillary say, I'm not saying she hasn't said something like that, but their side, AOC has said stuff like that. Pete Buttigieg, I think, said something along those lines too, just framing abortion in the way that it helps men. J.K. Rowling, she's talked about, like, there's a lot of male feminists or whatever that, you know, say that they care for women, but they push issues that benefit them. Like, you know, dudes being able to go in women's spaces or abortion. They get to escape responsibility by not having to take care of a child, whether it's emotionally, financially, you know, they get that quick exit. That's a tool of the patriarchy. We're the side of equal rights, bro. We're the side of equal rights. Anyway, let's talk about this story. I know I'm going over, but I want to address the story that's developed over the weekend. NBC ran a story about a woman in Georgia. And what's so interesting about this and sad is that NBC and everybody talking about it, they could be focusing on whether or not this hospital did some like malpractice sort of stuff. Because there's a woman who had terrible headaches. So she went to the hospital and they didn't do any sort of scans. And she was pregnant at the time. Her name was Adriana Smith. She sought treatment at Northside Hospital, but was released and given medication. Maybe they gave her some, I don't know what kind of medication, but I'm assuming some kind of pain reliever or whatever. I don't know. And they didn't run any tests or do any scans. And a lot of this information is like from the family, not like from doctors and things like that. But because the hospital did not comment on for the story. And then her boyfriend, he woke up to her gasping in air and making gargling noises. And they got her back to the hospital and stuff. And she had blood clots in her brain. And then she became brain dead. So what the hospital has decided to do is to try to keep her alive long enough for her baby to be born. She was 9 weeks pregnant at the time, and now the baby is still alive at 21 weeks. And so what has been told to the family, what they're saying has been told to them, is that they can't take her off life support because of the heartbeat, like Georgia laws. And it's about abortion, those abortion bans. Now that's not true. I'm going to play a clip from a Secular Pro-Life's breakdown of the story. Because it really has more to do with just life support laws, which different states, including ones with, no or very few abortion restrictions, have such laws. But they're trying to frame it around the issue of abortion so they can be like, oh, they want to keep these women alive. It's Handmaid's Tale. They're just incubators. Women aren't supposed to be incubators. And I'm sure people who are really upset and saying such things probably support surrogacy, probably support gay men buying women's eggs and then renting a womb for her to gestate their child or one of their child, because they both obviously can't be the father, and removing that child from the only two women who they've known and have helped. One that they knew, and one is actually their genetic mother, but the other who carried them. And then they, plop the baby on the man's chest, and immediately removing them from, the person who they knew for all that time. They're probably fine with that, I would assume. And women being used as incubators. I think that's far more Handmaid's Tale. This woman is the mother. And if there was a DNR, then they would respect the DNR, but she didn't seek to terminate her pregnancy. So some people are like, well, she was 9 weeks. She might not even know that she was pregnant. She might not have, but what I'm like, what I don't understand is why are so many, sometimes you don't have good options, right? It's the fact that they didn't scan her brain, and I don't know if they could have caught something and did something. But I'm assuming there's going to be like wrongful death and malpractice lawsuits or whatever going forward with the family. I'm not sure, but they allegedly didn't scan her, and and find out what was going on with her brain and why her headaches were so severe. So we could be having a story about that, rallying around her and the family. I don't know, raising more money than Anthony Carmelo and the N-word mom. Maybe if NBC wanted to do that, if the abortion activists wanted to do that, maybe, but they wanted to zero in on this issue to be like, they're just going to keep you making them babies whether you want to or not, even if you're dead on a ventilator, you know? But why do you want the baby to not live? I guess is my question. Why do you want the baby to not live? Why do you want them to not survive? Sometimes you don't have good options. But when you go to the hospital and there's some kind of medical emergency, let's say with mom and the baby, if mom is still awake or whatever and able to make the decision, she could say, put my baby first, or put my life first, or that maybe the dad has want to make the decision, like put my wife's life first, or let's save the baby or whatever. And they'll do what they can to preserve both lives. Maybe they have to prioritize one over the other, to try to save a life. In this situation, the mother has no future conscious experience. She's alive, but she doesn't have a future in the sense that she's going to leave that hospital room from what we know. But this baby has a future, and it's her baby. So why wouldn't we preserve life? Now, I don't think if they took her off life support and the baby just passed away because it needs its mother, especially at 9 weeks it did. I don't think that's the same as an abortion. That's would be a natural passing for both of them. But again, why wouldn't you want the baby to live and to give them the best chance? And there's a lot of mothers in the comments, or women in the comments that I'm reading, saying, if it was me, I would want my baby to have a shot. And I was going back and forth with someone, and they're like, oh, well, this is an issue. It's so heinous. I'm like, explain to me, out of all the options, why is this one to you so heinous? And they're like, the family, they don't want this. And I've read, the article, the full article, NBC and other stuff. They didn't say that they didn't want their daughter to live. I mean, they didn't want the baby to live. They don't like necessarily that they don't have a choice in the option in the law. And they talked about medical bills, and there was something about the baby having some fluid on the brain, which doesn't mean that baby's not going to survive or isn't going to be able to live normally and stuff. A lot of people are speculating what could be the medical outcome for the baby. We don't know. We just know right now there's a chance to save their life. And they're going to be without a mother. That's true, but this is a life. I've had a lot of debates with different pro-choicers, and I've listened to a lot, and their claim is that the woman is more important than someone who's living and breathing and has future conscious experience. And they'll say it's not really baby because it doesn't have future conscious experience. It's not blah, 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 blah. That's what they'll say. And, it's just a clump of cells. In this case, is it not? I don't like to think of the mother in that kind of way, but based on their rhetoric, she doesn't have a future conscious experience, and she can't breathe or any of those things without support. So if they always talk about having to prioritize, or it's better to prioritize. Even what they say doesn't make sense, because you might value one over the other doesn't necessarily follow that you should be able to kill that other human. But those are the things that they say. So why wouldn't, at this point, the baby get priority if only the baby can be saved? There's just a lot of things in their mentality that just doesn't work when you look at the story and some of their reactions to this particular story. So let me find this clip from Secular Pro-Life that explains.
Okay, Adriana Smith case. Okay, Adriana Smith case out of Georgia. Adriana Smith was 9 weeks pregnant when she was declared brain dead, and that was 3 months ago. The Georgia hospital is keeping her on life support, and her son is now at 21 weeks gestation, and they're hoping to get him to 32 weeks. It's extremely controversial because the whole situation is very traumatic for her family. Her mother is the one that's interviewed in the articles. And they are saying that the doctors told them that they weren't allowed to take her off of life support because of Georgia's anti-abortion law. Specifically, they say that the anti-abortion law does have exceptions for medical emergencies, but in Adriana's case, the law created a legal gray area. Because she is brain dead, no longer considered at risk herself, her medical team is legally required to maintain life support until the fetus reaches viability. That's why this headline says, family says woman declared brain dead, but her pregnancy continues under state law. And they're right. It is because of the state law. It's not because of the anti-abortion law, though. Later in the same article, they say, in most cases in other states, the decision would defer to the mother's wishes or those of her next of kin. That is true probably for the vast majority of situations of somebody on life support who can't make their own decisions. It's actually not true in most states, not just Georgia, when the person on life support is pregnant. This article has a good state-by-state overview. Basically, in most states, unless you have an advance directive, and a lot of times even if you do have an advance directive, if you can't make decisions, you're on life support and you're pregnant, they default to the system where they try to let the child live. It's not up to the families. It's also not up to the doctors. It's the default legal system. And it's worth noting that this has been the case in Georgia since 2007, so way before Dobbs overturned Roe v. Wade, before their heartbeat law. It's also the case in multiple states that are pro-choice states. So Colorado, Alaska, New Hampshire, Nevada, Pennsylvania, I'm missing one, Illinois. Those are all states that broadly support abortion rights and also have laws about defaulting to trying to let the child live in situations where the pregnant mother is brain dead. This is the specific law for Georgia. It basically says that if someone is on life support and they can't make decisions anymore and they're pregnant, physicians are not allowed to end life support unless two conditions are met. The first condition is that the fetus is not viable. And in addition to that, the second condition is that the pregnant woman had an advance directive where she explicitly said that she would want withdrawal of life-sustaining measures. The idea seems to be that if we don't know for sure what she would have wanted if she were pregnant, then we assume that she would have wanted the baby to live if possible. This situation of a brain dead pregnant woman and them trying to get to a successful live birth, it's pretty rare. It's not entirely unprecedented. This review found that in 77% of cases, they did get to a successful live birth, and in 85% of those live births, the babies had normal outcomes by the time.
Oh, the video is probably longer on TikTok, but she probably could only upload it for 2 minutes and 20 seconds. But yeah, that's the gist of it, though. So this is not about an abortion law. It's something that people on both sides of the aisle, Colorado, for example, is very, very, very pro-abortion and very left-wing. But why wouldn't we want to give the best shot to these babies? And people are just so programmed to think less of the babies so they can justify abortion. That's just what it, like maybe there was more nuance or clear thinking some years ago whenever I guess they maybe wrote these laws, but the activists are so gung-ho on seeing the preborn as less than that they're just like, oh, this is so disgusting. And so when I was going back and forth with someone and they're like, well, it's not right, it's egregious because the family they don't get that right. And I was like, okay, let's say it was me and I'm brain dead, I'm pregnant, and I said, why do you think that my father should have a say in whether or not my child gets to live? Why do you think that's the case? And they didn't answer, but I mean, again, sometimes there are no good options. Now the most controversial thing to me, assuming that they have to pay the medical bills, which I don't know why they would have to pay the medical bills. I mean, this woman is an adult. She's not married. And so they're her bills. She obviously can't pay them. I can understand they might want to find whoever they can to pay it, but can the family just be like, not it? But But if it's mandated, even if they want her life, if it's mandated that she can't be taken off life support, and she's been on it for some weeks to try to keep the baby alive, I think the state should cover that. I don't think the family should have to pay for that, or should try to make the family pay for that. I don't. But yeah, this could have been a story, you know, about, I don't know, hope and trying to comfort this family and help them in this terrible situation. Because her son, she has another son that doesn't understand what's going on, and they just are saying that she's sleeping, you know. So that's rough. It's psychologically terrible and tragic for the family. And I gosh, that would be a brutal thing to go through. I can't imagine, you know. But I'd want that baby to have their best shot. And if it were me and I was the one in that hospital, I would want that baby to live. And there is no, I think even if she has no future consciousness, I still think that she inherently has value, and that maintains with her because she is made in the image of God. But she can't be harmed in the sense that, you know, she's going to be robbed of her life if the baby continues. Like her life is going to be over once they unplugged her and they end that life support. So if her child that she was already growing, some people are like, they're forcing her to carry it. I'm like, how are they forcing her? The baby's already in her. They're preserving her life so she can continue to preserve the life of her child. Why do you have such an issue with that? Why do you have such an issue with that? Because at this point, 21 weeks, only one of them has a future conscious experience. So why do you want the child to die? And it does seem that personal for some of these folks. I've read some wild comments about it, man. I haven't had the chance to watch a lot of TikToks about it because I was at convention all weekend and didn't have internet, and I was busy too. But some of these folks are nuts. Anyway, that's all I got for you guys. Thank you guys for joining me today. You know, it was a week-long break, but we're back again. Please go to blacktnews.com, check out different content, website, articles, videos, etc. If you like what I do, please consider leaving a donation on the website because it does cost a stream, run the site, all the good stuff. You guys can support it very much. To appreciate you guys. You guys can also check out different merch that's available on the website, like different mugs and t-shirts and whatnot. So you guys can check out that stuff. We also have my books you guys can check out. There's a link in the description of watching on Facebook or Amazon, Facebook or YouTube that'll take you to the Amazon page. But if you go to blacktnews.com, there's a banner at the top of the merchandise page that'll take you to my book website, which is ninja.popshelling.com. I have 18 books all together. 2 of them are nonfiction, one of them being, of course, God is blatantly against abortion. And the rest of my books are fiction, ranging from all kinds of different stuff. People are like, oh my gosh, you write so many things. I'm like, I write whatever I want to. I'm very easily inspired. All right. Thank you guys. And I will see you tomorrow.